Hello. Thank you so much for listening to the presentation. My name's Katie Sykes. I'm an associate professor in Thompson Rivers University's Faculty of Law, and I'm really happy to have the chance to talk to you today about some work that I'm doing on law and new technology and access to justice, particularly in this time of the COVID-19 pandemic. And as you can see, I'm talking to you now from my living room, from my couch. So my work and the way that I'm delivering this to you has been affected by these extraordinary times as well. Before I start on the presentation, I'd like to acknowledge that the land we are on is part of the unceded ancestral homelands of the Tecumleps te Secwepemc within Secwepemc Ulu. One of my research interests is how digital technology and innovative thinking about law can be used to help people know about their legal rights. We have a big access to justice problem in this country. Law is complicated. Courts are really complicated, and they're very hard to navigate for untrained people. They're even hard to navigate for trained people. Lawyers are expensive, and most people can't afford to hire a lawyer to guide them through their legal entitlements or to fight for them in court. And when I say most people, I really mean it. People with middle class incomes and professional jobs can't afford lawyers either. One thing that you often hear said to illustrate that is that many lawyers, probably most lawyers, can't afford to hire a lawyer. Full service legal advice and representation often really is a luxury that's only for large businesses and very wealthy people. This is not good. It's, of course, not good at an individual level for those who are affected, but socially, we can't really say that we have a society governed by law if so many people can't actually use the rights that the law gives them. But new technology does provide some ways that can help to make the law more accessible. It can empower people to understand their rights, their entitlements, and their responsibilities by connecting them to the information that is right for them and fits their situation. It's probably easier to explain what I'm talking about by showing you an example. So right now, in this pandemic, one thing that people really need guidance with is the many support programs and forms of emergency relief that are available to them. I'm going to show you an online tool that I worked on with a team of law student and law alumni volunteers to help people with the new Canada Emergency Response Benefit, or CERB, for people who've lost work because of COVID-19. We call this project COVID. It's a combination of COVID and aid, and we're working on a few different tools and sources of information to help people out with all of these different programs. To build the tools, the apps, one of which I'm going to show you, we use a program that's provided by a legal technology company called Neotologic. So here is the beginning of the CERB Helper app. As you can see, at least I hope, the interface is welcoming. It uses simple questions in plain language. And the purpose here is to find the situation that matches the situation of the person who's using it so that we can guide them to the right information. Now, the rules for CERB itself are actually not that complicated. Unlike with a lot of benefits, the rules are really designed to be simple and to make it easy for people to apply, because I think the government's priority is to get support to people fast and not put unnecessary blocks in their way and keep the economy moving. But even with that, there are definitely still areas where people might not be sure if they're eligible. And there are also supplemental resources and other information that we can point people to, depending on what their situation is, whether or not they're eligible. So the CERB helper begins by asking the user about what situation they're in. We tried to make this very empathetic and intuitive, so it's easy to use. We used plain language, and we tried to give examples that people will recognize themselves in. So I will walk you quickly through one of the possible pathways through this CERB Helper app. And there are many. There's a number of user situations that it starts with, and then after those there are various choices. So there are lots of different places that you can end up. So this pathway is for somebody who has been affected by the pandemic and lost some work or some income, but they still have some income. So the app is going to ask them whether they're under the threshold for CERB. And that means, are they making $1,000 per month or less? If our user is within that $1,000 threshold, then they go into another screen and it asks these eligibility questions. This is an interactive form. As you answer yes to each question, it populates with the next question. And if you say no to any of these questions, the app will stop and it'll tell you you're not eligible. So it's not going to make you go through answering all of them if there's no need to, because you've got to meet all of these criteria to get the benefit. With the Neota software, we can build in explanatory text like I'm showing here in this slide. Here we've put it in as hover text, so it comes up if the user hovers over the question. And we tried to think about moving through this process from the user's point of view to anticipate where they might have questions and want to find the answer fast. So you can compare that to the information that's on the government website, which is actually very good. There's a lot of FAQs type information, but you don't necessarily get to the piece of information that you need at the point where you need it. When you're thinking, okay, do I need to prove whether this is true or not? It's more useful to know that right now rather than go back to the website and look through the FAQs and find the one that responds to that question. So this user, this imaginary user, does seem to meet all the requirements, so they can go ahead and apply for CERB. And now the user can go on to get a final report. That report is long-ish. We tried to keep it short and simple, but it does fill up a fairly big screen. So I've put it on 2 slides so that I can fit everything in without it being too tiny. And the information in this report is tailored based on the answers that this person gave along the way. So you'll see here the report tells them you're eligible under the new rules that were announced on April 15th. When the CERB first came in, people couldn't apply unless they'd lost all of their income. So I think there are probably people out there who have heard that in the news and might not realize that if they still have a few shifts, if their income has declined, but they still have something coming in, now they can apply. And that's who we were thinking of when we put this in, to just confirm, yes, you still can. In the report, we also put in hyperlinks to other useful information. So in this second info bullet here, you'll see there's a link, and that goes to a National Post article that helps people estimate the income tax they'll eventually owe on the CERB payments, because it is taxable. And here is the end of the report, and there are more hyperlinks here to information that we chose to fit this user's situation. So this report would look different for someone who took a different pathway through the app. For example, back at the beginning, one of the user options is for someone who's a student. And if that person is a student and is eligible for CERB, because some students are, if they were working before the pandemic and they lost their job, then they'll get to this report and it will look a bit different. It'll have information that we built in especially for students. And the software can pick out that information, understand that the person picked the I'm a student option, and put it into the report to match what they told the app. So that was a really quick walk through our CERB Helper app. And I hope that you are interested in this or think that it looks fun, or that it might be helpful for you or someone you know. And obviously, applying for government benefits and needing government benefits is not fun. But actually, going through these pathways can be quite, I think, kind of interesting and fun. And I hope will be helpful for people. So if you're in that situation or know anyone who is, I really hope you'll give it a try. Please do. It is a work in progress, and we're continuing to work on improving it. So do send feedback, and we have an email address where we are monitoring it to get feedback from the people using the app. The COVID project also has a blog page, and there are links to the apps that we've made, and we're continuing to work on more, so we will put up links to them as we make them. And we have a Twitter account, so you can follow all the developments. So there are other projects, as I mentioned, that we are working on or have already completed. This one is our app for homeowners, which gives really simple information for people who are having trouble with or think they might have trouble with mortgage payments, and also condo fees if that applies to their situation. So it's simpler than the SERB app. It really just points people to the right contact information for their bank in the final report, so that they can use that if they want to apply to skip a payment or to defer one or more payments. And it also gives some information that people might not realize about this process, like the fact that skip payments are rolled into the outstanding loan and they might end up costing more in the long run. So this app, we're working on a translation of it into Punjabi, and we still have some work to do on that, but I'm very excited about rolling it out as soon as we can, and this is just a sneak preview of one of the screens and what it will look like. So these are great tools. I think that they're useful and they're very rewarding and interesting for us to work on. I want to confess that I am not particularly technologically proficient. I do not know how to write computer code, and generally speaking, the students and the alumni who are working with me on this don't either. There may be a couple of exceptions, but we really are lawyers, not computer people. So there's a couple of things that kind of enable us to use our legal knowledge to make this kind of service for people. One is the Neotologic platform that allows us to turn legal knowledge into this kind of system without being programmers. And then the other ingredient is really more of a way of thinking about the law. And it has a name. It's called legal knowledge engineering. Knowledge engineering generally means taking expertise and turning it into a form that can be replicated over and over again in an automated way. That means you don't have to go and talk to an expert one-on-one every time. The expert's expertise can be provided on a one-to-many basis, and it can be available anywhere, anytime. This kind of system is called an expert system. Legal knowledge engineering means doing that same thing with legal expertise, and the system you get in that case is a legal expert system. This sketch represents how expert systems work, and it comes from Darren Thompson, who's one of the world's top experts in this area. If you want to know more about knowledge engineering, his blog is the best place you could possibly start. And I'll give you a quick look at what the logic machinery inside our SERB app looks like, so you can get a glimpse into a real-life example of the engineering part of this legal knowledge engineering. So it's actually a pretty simple series of decision trees. This is not the highest of high tech by any means. It's not what most people would call artificial intelligence. It's not a machine that learns, that teaches itself to get smarter. It's really just a bunch of logical pathways. And one of the design principles that goes into this is that if there are any kind of complicated steps to go through or analyses to be done, we try to the extent possible to build them into the logic pathways that are inside the app, in the machinery, not on the outside, so not making the user go through that analysis. That takes the burden off the user to figure out the steps or to figure out which information is right for me. The system should do that work for the user. The outside of the system, the user interface, really should be as simple as possible, and as much as possible, everything complicated should be turned into a process that the app does for the user. The concept of legal knowledge engineering is really the bridge that connects this COVID project and also a course that I teach in the law school on designing legal expert systems to the main research project that I'm working on right now. And that is research on British Columbia's Civil Resolution Tribunal. This is one of the first and most innovative online courts in the world. And I would like to note here that the research project is funded by an Insight Development Grant from the Social Sciences and Humanities Research Council of Canada. The Civil Resolution Tribunal has been in the news lately. When the pandemic hit, all the physical courts shut down, almost completely and almost overnight. Only the most urgent and essential matters are being heard in court. Suddenly, very traditional courts had to pivot to using remote technology. The Supreme Court of the United States and the British Columbia Court of Appeal are now hearing cases by video conference. We are in a new era. The future really is now. Remote Courts Worldwide is a website that is tracking information about courts around the world as they make this pivot to using remote technology. What is remarkable about the Civil Resolution Tribunal and what's getting some attention from around the world right now is that it was already in the future. It was designed as a remote court that people can access without physically going to a particular place, usually accessed online, but it is possible to use it by phone for people who would prefer not to use the internet. When the pandemic hit, the Civil Resolution Tribunal extended some filing deadlines to help out with people who were dealing with unusual life circumstances and needed more time. But apart from that, they simply continued business as usual. Another noteworthy thing about the CRT is that it's what legal technology expert Richard Susskind calls an extended court. It does more than just shift dispute resolution online. It reaches further out into some functions that traditional courts just don't do, like helping people understand their legal rights and providing them with tools that they can use to solve their legal problems. The CRT does that in part with a legal expert system. It's built into the design of the tribunal, and it's called the Solution Explorer. The Solution Explorer is really just a much bigger, more sophisticated version of what we're doing with the COVID apps. I will take you on a very quick trip into the Solution Explorer, but it's available to everyone at the Civil Resolution Tribunal website. It's free. You can use it yourself, and I hope you will. So let's say I've got a problem with something that I bought and I'm not happy with it. Like I am becoming tired of my bad eating habits in the lockdown, and I've decided to get healthier, and I bought a fancy new blender so I can make smoothies. And let's say my new blender broke right after I got it. So I might want to file a claim against the seller or the manufacturer. But first of all, it's going to be really helpful for me to know what my rights are as a consumer. And I'm not going to hire a lawyer to advise me about this. Even the fanciest of fancy blenders are roughly about a few $100s, and a lawyer is going to set me back a lot more than that, so it's just not worth it. That would cost me more to talk to the lawyer than just to buy myself a new blender. So this kind of matter is within the CRT's jurisdiction over small claims, and I will go in and find the pathway for small claims and problems between buyers and sellers. I'm the buyer, so I'm going to click the option for buyers, and I bought this blender for my personal use, so I'll pick that option. And now I come to an information sheet which is written in plain language about consumer protection law in BC. So I might read that and figure out what I need to do, and that might solve my problem right there. And I also have the option to continue. And if I can't work this out with the seller, I can file a claim with the CRT, and then I can get help with mediation. And ultimately, a tribunal member can make a decision in our case if that's necessary. The CRT represents a fundamentally different way of thinking about providing justice. Most of all, it's designed around the needs of users. The Solution Explorer is an example of how technological tools can empower people by putting knowledge about the law into their own hands. So I will end up by saying that the legal system in BC and around the world has changed really fast in the last few weeks, and so has everything. But the change may be especially stark in the legal system because in the legal system, we have a lot of tradition and a lot of things that have been done a certain way for many decades. And all of a sudden, they just had to change. I believe that a lot of that change will not simply reverse when the pandemic starts to subside. We are moving into the future. And here in BC, where we have this world leading online court, the future really is here already. I'm excited to see what happens next in the legal system, and I think that we'll see some important changes that will make things work better for people. And I believe that our smart, creative, TRU trained law grads will be an important part of that. Thank you so much for listening to this. It was great to give you a little bit of insight into the research that I'm doing, and I hope you enjoyed it. Goodbye.